maybe. Let's see. I don't want to block people. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are, just a little background about us, we are a small romance-only bookstore here in Oklahoma City.
Oh, nice.
That opened maybe August.
Oh, brand new.
Yeah, relatively new. This is our second book club meeting. So we were just like what we wanted to read and what we saw on the there was so much how great it was, fun, cute. We're like, all right, let's go read it. It's Halloween time, why not? So a couple of questions for you, and then I'm gonna let my girlies talk. So this is my first, experience. You read or you wrote Well Met, but this is kind of like your first, like paranormal romance book. What made you jump from the Well Met series? What was the inspiration?
Well, I'd written the 4 books in the Well Met series, and I needed a little bit of a break because the well was kind of getting dry as far as that goes. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to write next. I was, at the end of my contract, so we were needing to, give them something else to see if they wanted it. And I've always loved ghost stories. I think ghost stories are so much fun, but I'm very much a wuss when it comes to like horror. I don't like, yeah, I read, like, if I read a Stephen King book, like I have half the time my eyes are like squinting and I'm just turning the pages real fast during the really gross parts. I'm very squeamish when it comes to that stuff. So, but I really like stuff like Julie and the Phantoms on Netflix, the TV show Ghosts, things hauntings like that are a little more lighthearted, a little less scary. Haunted Mansion is probably about as scary as I get. So I just have always loved ghost stories. I've always wanted to kind of write one, and I kept coming up with some different ideas for some different ghost stories I wanted to tell. And I kind of thought, well, I can either like have a whole list of different ghost stories and I can send them to my agent until she's like, stop sending me ghost stories because this is getting old. What I did was I ended up creating a place where I could put all those stories. So that was kind of how Boneyard Key got its start. And I lived in Florida for like 25 years. So and we just recently moved to Arizona. So I was still had Florida on my mind. So I wanted to set it in Florida because I thought that would be a really fun kind of thing to do. There's a lot of, smaller tourist town type destinations in Florida that aren't just Disney, where they're, basically doing anything they can to make a living, off of whatever tourism they have. So I thought the idea of a haunted town that just kind of leans into it and is like, yep, we have ghosts and here's a shot glass with a ghost on it, that kind of thing. So that was kind of where it all started. And then it's all kind of gone from there. No, I don't have your sound. It kind of goes in and out.
I'm gonna sit closer here. You can hear
better. Again, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm gonna sit over here. Can you hear better here?
Yes, much better. Okay.
I'm gonna sit my booty right here.
Okay, perfect.
So you kind of talked about it in the book, but when you think of tourist towns, it's like, oh, here's a mermaid, and it's all the behind the scenes. So I really love that, for the town, it was, well, yes, it's touristy, but this is our life. This is, this is our normal. Is that coming from something that you kind of experience of like, yeah, it's, nichey, but this is me. Like, was there anything that you drew from that?
Well, I think I drew from living in Florida. I lived in a smaller town called Mount Dora, which is just northwest of Orlando. It's grown now because Orlando's just kind of crept out. But when we moved there in the early 2000s, it was very small town. They do a big arts festival and a craft festival every year, but for the most part, it's just this cute, quaint small town, walkable streets, little shops. But then twice a year, they have this massive arts festival that brings like couple 100,000 people into the town for the weekend. And so there would be times that we would think, well, I'm going to go to the bookstore today. Oh, I can't. The craft festival is here. I don't want to go anywhere near downtown because the craft festival is here. So a little bit of that, where when you live in a touristy place like that, in some ways, because you want the tourists to come, you want them to have a good time, you want them to spend their money because that's your economy. But at the same time, it almost feels like you're living on a movie set in a way where, like, to the people that are here for the weekend, like it's not a real place. But it's like, no, this is my home. This is where I live. This is where this is the bar I go to every Friday night. This isn't just a quaint hangout to go for the weekend. You know what I mean? So it was, I think I kind of drew on just the experience of having lived in touristy places where people come on vacation, and a lot of times people will come on vacation and don't understand that you actually have a life. The number of times I have had people come to visit me when we lived in the Orlando area and say, well, we're going to Disney on Tuesday. Do you want to come? And it's like, well, I have a job. Like, I actually work. Yeah, not everybody who's here is on vacation.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a distinction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so this is book five for you. So,
Yes.
what kind of shocked you the most when writing this book? What, was, I guess, the most challenging for you?
The most challenging part for this was starting a new series. I had written, the Well Met came out in 2019. I had actually written it I started writing it in 2017 into 2018. So by the time Well Travel came out in 2022, that's, 5 years of writing about these same people and these same, location and setting. And so they felt like people that I knew at this point because I had been writing about them for so long and had written so many different stories about them, or stories they all featured in. So then starting over with completely new setting, new characters, new everything I was excited at first because it's like, yay, a whole new, it's fun to play with a whole new setting. But then I forgot how cardboard everything is when you're first writing it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had to go back and dig out a first draft of Will Met to remind myself that sucked too, because I was so used to characters that I was familiar with that I forgot how hard it was. I have to, at least my own process, I have to just write a first draft and figure out who the characters are through their dialogue and as they're relating to other people. And then it's like, oh, that's why they're like that. And then I can go back and fix it in revision. But when you're actually putting those words on the page for the first time, at least for me, they felt so two-dimensional and cardboard and just awful. In your head, it's amazing. And then you put it on paper and no, it's awful. So that was the hardest part for me, was remembering that it's a process. And every single book is like that. I mean, I've written five. I've now written six because I'm revising the new one. Every time it's kind of a running joke with a lot of writer friends of mine, where the first thing you do is Google, how do I write a book? Because it's like you forget every single time when you're getting ready to start a new one. It's like, how do I do this? Because you've just finished, like, put the finishing touches on something you've been working on for a long time, and then you have to start all over. And it's really daunting. At least it is for me.
Only imagine. So it sounds like you just kind of wrote the book and the characters came to you. Was there one character that you're like, okay, I know this character, and everybody else kind of had to figure out who they were, or was this all just kind of new?
Well, it was all kind of a process. Like, I started out with Cassie and her house because I was figuring out how are we going to get to this town? What's going to bring us to this town? So, the big inspiration, this was what I put in I had a little section in my proposal called Vibes. The vibe of this book was The Last Great American Dynasty by Taylor Swift, if it had been written by Jimmy Buffett and then turned into an episode of Ghosts. So it's about, I was really inspired by that, the old house that has a history, and then a new person shows up to kind of take it over. And then a new person shows up to kind of take it over. But then, with Florida vibes and ghosts and lighthearted kind of hauntings. So I had the idea of, and I love old things. I love old houses. I love buildings that used to be other things, like a bookstore that has like an old like bank facade across the top, like because it used to be a bank 50 years ago or something like that. That always intrigues me because I always want to know the history of things. So So that was kind of a big part of the inspiration. And so that was kind of where it all started, was figuring out who Cassie was, why she was coming to this place, and then everything else kind of grew from there. I don't know if that answers your question.
Did okay. Was there a character in the book you had to tell yourself like, no, this isn't who they are, this is who they are? Was there somebody that like kept telling you in your head like this is who I want them to be versus like who they ended up being, or did it all just kind of be naturally?
um Most of the characters in this book behaved themselves as far as doing what I wanted them to.
Okay.
I needed to figure out why. I needed to figure out why, why Nick stayed in that town and why he felt the way he felt about the town, why he felt the way he felt about relationships. And so I really had to, there was a lot of thinking and planning that had to go into that and figuring out the backstory behind it so it made some sense. But for the most part, I'm trying to remember. For the most part, everybody kind of behaved themselves. Mrs. Hawkins ended up being a little more playful than I
Mm-hmm.
thought she would be. Than I had planned. The whole thing with her being into reality TV
That was
was
great.
was
That was
something that just kind of came up one night when I was working, and I was like, "Well, this would be kind of fun," because I was probably it was probably during Love Island, so which I am ridiculously addicted to. So that it definitely came from that. Just the idea of just watching some trash television with your ghost was something that ended up being kind of fun. But yeah, for the most part, though, the characters in this series, this book, behave themselves. The Well Met series was a little different. Um, I did have some characters that did not behave themselves and didn't do what they were supposed to do.
well,
And I can tell you about that later if you guys want to talk about the Well Met series at all.
yeah, I would love to hear. I researched realized you have a whole other series.
You getting your voice.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So I honestly thought this was your first whole other series. So tell us a little bit about that and kind of what got you into writing.
Oh God. Um,
The hard question.
I mean, writing is just kind of something that I've always been into. I learned to read when I was really, really young. My mom taught me to read that's just like early memories is going to the library with my mom and just, getting kids books out of the kids section of the library. And then she taught me to read really young and I could read, I picked it up really quickly. I remember, being in like the pre-kindergarten or something, and they have like some book called Getting Ready to Read. And I was reading like the teacher instructions in the back because I could read it already. Um, so I would take notebook paper and I would fold it in half and my mom would staple it down the side and that would be a book and then I would write little stories in it. And I was writing stories. I didn't have a lot of life experience. I was like probably 6 or 7. And I was writing stories about girls who had dogs and they took naps. And that was pretty much the story. There wasn't a lot going on. But I wanted but it's just always been a hobby. It's always kind of been my thing. Um, and then I would do a National Novel Writing Month every year for a long time. And one year I wrote a romance novel because I just didn't know what else to write. I was like, I'm gonna write something romance. And I had so much fun writing it that I decided I wanted to do something with it. And so that's when I really started taking it seriously. And that was probably about 10 years ago now that I really started looking into like, writers groups and mentorships and different things. And so then a couple of years later, I got an agent. And then a couple of years after that, we sold Well Met. So it took, it's a long road, at least it was for me. I don't have the hustle to self-publish. I have so much admiration for the people that do. Because I have some friends who self-publish and they do a really good job at it. But it's so much to me, it's like running an entire small business, and I just don't think I have the hustle for it. It's a lot of work.
There's a lot. We totally understand.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of characters in this book and a lot of well-developed characters. So this obviously isn't it. Okay, one and done. What's next for this?
I am working on book 2 right now. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say, but I'll say that book 2 is Sophie and a character that we haven't met yet. The tropes the tropes are rival ghost tours enemies to lovers, and there's only one hurricane. So that's what we have in store for book two. And
That's
that's
fun. That's really exciting.
I'm excited
I
about it. I
thought
think it's a
Sophie
lot of
would
fun.
be with Theo. I mean,
Got a lot from people, and apparently, when you put in a romance novel, when if two characters have a conversation, their book is next. And I made a mistake on that. I actually had a phone call with my editor last week, and I was like, apparently, I screwed up here because everybody is expecting to be Sophie and Theo. But I really did just intend for them to, patch up their friendship and be friends. So because I already had Sophie's romance planned. It's very possible if I hadn't had it planned, I might have gone in that direction. But I have some other thoughts for Theo that I'm figuring out exactly who he's going to be. So there's some more clues come up in the second book, and we'll see from there.
do you know how many books are going to be in the series, or are you still working with series?
I do not.
Okay.
contract wise, it's just these two, and then I'm doing a fifth Ren Fair book after this. So that's all we have under contract right now. I have a lot of ideas for Boneyard Key. I have a lot of things that I want to do with these characters. So I am hoping for more, but we're gonna see. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed and just keep writing as well as I can, and hopefully they'll keep buying more books.
That's so exciting. All right. I think that's all I had questions on. What questions do you guys? Group of introverts, so don't mind us.
Oh God, believe me, I understand. I had to go have a panic attack before I turned this on. So
We have.
I'm a very big introvert. Whenever I do like any of these like Zoom things or like in-person things, there's always the panic attack beforehand.
Oh yeah,
big time.
I totally understand that completely. Anything?
I mean,
I'll still ask questions. I could keep going.
We get to see Elmer in book two.
The question
will Elmer be in book two? Elmer has gone. So
Elmer did leave.
I mean, he has moved on. So I believe because at the end of Haunted, they do move his recliner into Kathy's house, and I believe that the recliner makes an appearance. It's definitely mentioned as being in the house, but Elmer has moved on, which kind of made me sad because I really had so much fun writing him.
Listen, we love Elmer. We're talking about beforehand. What's the main characters who are our favorites? And Elmer and Nan are just so fun. Yeah, I love the idea of an elderly ghost texting. It made me laugh.
He was one that I didn't expect to have so much fun writing. Like when I was planning the book, I just was, okay, this ghost, this cantankerous kind of old man ghost is going to be texting with Nick. But yeah, he ended up being like such a great wingman. And I love having I always have to have at least one character that has no filter, and that was definitely Elmer in this book. In the Well Met series, it's Mitch for sure. But yeah, it was a lot of fun writing him. And then, but of course, I'd always planned for the end of the book for him to decide to move on because Nick doesn't need his company anymore. I think one of the reasons he stuck around for so long was because Nick was lonely, and he's not anymore. So he.
Right.
I've been wondering that the whole time. So
there's that was going to work if the two were to move in together.
Yeah.
So I felt like it or Elmer. I think what else I had questions on as I was reading. Okay. If you
sorry, can you ask her if the table flipping thing yeah, the real
okay. The question was there a table flipping scene? And they wanted to know if it was Teresa from Real Housewives or where that inspiration came from.
And where was the table flipping?
Reality show that they were watching.
I don't remember. That's very funny. I'm not a Real Housewives person. I'm definitely a Love Island person. Okay. So it was definitely Romance Resort is definitely the takeoff of Love Island. But I mean, I've watched like a few different, that was kind of one of my pandemic things, was getting into reality TV. So, like Love is Blind and Love Island and that kind of thing. So I probably just threw it in there because I know that people flip tables.
That is very true. So I guess that answered my next question was why TV, why, that kind of stuff.
Cutting out again.
I'm so sorry. So the question was why did they watch, such crappy TV? But it sounds like that's something that you personally, right?
Yeah, it was just something. I mean, to me, Cassie is very much a like, I don't want to say overachiever, but she's very, very practical, very business oriented. So then I think when she, when she has a night off or whatever, if it's in the evening, she likes to turn her brain off and watch, bad television that she knows is bad, but she doesn't care. Like that phrase was like, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it, and period. I don't know if that answers the question.
No. So I know this is like trying to just ask who your favorite child is, but if you were to have dinner with one of the characters from your book, who would it be?
One of the characters in my books?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know.
Well, if we're putting all the series together, if we're talking the Well Met series and this book, I would say probably Simon. Just because I have a lot of love for him, because he was my first romance hero that I wrote, so I just adore him, and he has a lot of issues, and I want to apologize to him for that. Um, this book, and if we're talking about Haunted Ever After, I would probably love to have dinner with Nan, the grandmother ghost hunter, because she was again a lot of fun. Another person with no filter that I very much enjoyed writing.
Can we ask her what gave her inspiration to give Nick the ability to speak?
Okay, so the question was, what gave you the inspiration to give Nick the ability to speak?
Well, I just, to me, the idea of it is that, the people in the town know that the town is haunted, and they're fine with it. So to me, having him as, one of the main characters, having a ghost as a friend and have it be not a big deal, is a way to kind of show that, show it to the reader that, is part of that. It's a normal experience in that world, is for him to have the ability to communicate, and have it be a casual thing. Like, there's somebody at the diner, at one point says to him, like, oh, tell Elmer I said hey, because he knew him from back in the day. Like, the people in the town know that he communicates with Elmer, know it's not a big deal, and it's just, ghosts don't necessarily need to be like gotten rid of. Like, it doesn't need to be like, ghost hunter, get rid of the spirit in your house. It's just like, ghosts are here, whatever. So so that became, so having him need to talk to ghosts and having him have that ability, is kind of where I got the inspiration to kind of come up with the idea of like the founding 15, who were the survivors of the hurricane that wiped out the first town, and now they still live here, and the descendants all have some sort of ability that in my head kind of came from the storm itself, and something thinning of the veil, something. So
I like that. So with book 2, are there new ghosts?
There's at least one new ghost in book 2. I think there's going to be a second one that I'm going to add in revisions, because one thing my editor always says is, give me one more ghost. So there's definitely one new one. We revisit some others that we already know, and maybe get to know them a little bit more. But yeah, it's fun getting to expand the world and figuring out where new spirits fit in.
I'm curious to see about the beach bomb. I'm hoping that we see a little more of him in the second.
We get a little bit more of him, of the beach bum, in this book, and I have some thoughts on what I want to do with him later. So I want to pull him in. And figure out what his story is. I'm still not entirely sure, but I have some thoughts. Which is one thing that's kind of fun as a writer, is you can kind of go back and see like what you wrote about them before, and then how can I turn that into a story? So you kind of, it's giving yourself a prompt for later, which is kind of fun.
Are there any Easter eggs in book one. Your readers might be surprised to see kind of in the next book or what you see as well.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you have any Easter eggs that you're like, yeah, I did this in the book, and most people have gone through it in the book?
Um, Not a whole lot of Easter eggs in this book. I would say there are definitely a lot of Florida Easter eggs for people who live in Florida. Um, and that a lot of people have tagged me on Instagram on that they've gotten just talking about like the public sub sandwiches. Tijuana Flats is a very popular like Central Florida Tex-Mex chain that is kind of one of those like local spots. Um, and just a lot about humidity for sure being in Florida. And then a few Taylor Swift Easter eggs just because it's how I roll. But nothing really, really, really huge.
And it looks like our time is running out. So one last question. We talk about what you write. What do you read? What book are you
What book am I what?
enjoying reading the most?
Oh gosh. I mean, I read a lot of romance because I love it and that what inspired me to write it. Probably the couple of books that I've read most recently. Well, I just read Happy Medium by Sarah Adler that I've been saving that one because it was a ghost book, so I wanted to wait until I finished writing my ghost book before I read her ghost book. And I also just read The Undermining of Twyla and Frank by Megan Bannon, which is
That's
the
a
follow
good
up to
one.
Heart and Mercy.
Mhm.
I will not shut up about those books. I love her writing so much. Her brain, I don't understand how it works, and I wish I did because I wish I could write like that. She's so good. So those are like my current. Those are the ones I've read the most recently. Every so often I'll read something like of a more like of a fantasy-ish kind of thing. The Night Circus is one of my favorite books ever. I That's something that I reread probably once a year or so. And then I read The Starless Sea by Aaron Morgenstern as well. That was a pandemic read that was such a long book, but it was such a great book during that time to get just kind of lost in. So I like stuff like that too, that gives you like a sort of fantasy-ish world to kind of get immersed in. I don't read them as much as I read romance, but I do enjoy like switching things up every so often.
Awesome. That everything? Do you guys have any other questions? Awesome. Jen, we appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't hear a lot of it.
Oh, that's my own fault. I'm gonna bring my headphone. I was gonna ask
Maybe that'll work. Yeah.
you, would you be okay if we take a picture of us next to the TV with you?
Picture you said?
You okay? Awesome. Your house was- Yeah.